My cousin Derek loved making fun of my stutter at every family dinner. He'd bang his fist going got promoted until everyone laughed. At his wedding, he took the mic for his big 25-minute speech and started with Brittany and I first met at a CCC. My cousin Derek was the golden boy of our family. Perfect teeth, perfect job, perfect everything. But he had this one habit that made every family gathering pure hell for me. He loved mocking my stutter. I've had it since I was 7. Got hit by a car riding my bike, traumatic brain injury, spent 3 months relearning how to talk. Most days it's barely noticeable, but when I'm nervous, when I'm put on the spot, the words get stuck like cars in a traffic jam. Derek figured this out real quick. Christmas dinner, 2019. I'm trying to tell my aunt about my new job. I got promoted to got promoted, Derek shouts across the table, machine gunning the sound while pounding his fist. The whole room goes quiet. Sorry, couldn't help myself. Hey everyone, remember when he tried to order pizza last year? Can I have a large? The delivery guy hung up. He wasn't even there when I ordered that pizza. I never told anyone about it, but everyone laughed. Even my mom gave this weak little chuckle, probably just to keep the peace. Derek's mom, my Aunt Linda, actually wiped tears from her eyes. She was laughing so hard. "Oh, Derek, you're terrible," she said, but you could tell she was proud of her comedian son. Thanksgiving 2020 was worse. Derek brought props. I kid you not, this 30-year-old man brought a buzzer to dinner. Every time I tried to speak, he'd hit it. Bzzz. Sorry, time's up. Next contestant. My girlfriend dumped me 2 weeks later, said she couldn't handle the family dynamic. By Easter 2021, he'd recruited others. His little brother started doing it too, then their dad. Soon, half the table was stuttering mockingly whenever I opened my mouth. Derek had created a whole bit where he'd pretend to be a translator. "What Jimmy's trying to say," he'd announce, even when I hadn't stuttered at all, "is that he's grateful for this meal. It only took him 5 minutes to get the words out, but we're patient people." The worst part? He was smart about it. Never did it when my dad was around. Dad would have knocked his teeth out, only when it was mostly Derek's side of the family, and he always played it off as just joking around or bringing levity to family tensions. 4th of July 2021. We're at my uncle's lake house. I'm telling my 10-year-old cousin about fireflies when Derek appears with a beer in each hand. Jimmy's giving a science lesson," he announces to nobody. "Someone get this kid a speech therapist for his birthday." My little cousin looked confused, then started laughing when all the adults did. That's when something inside me snapped. Not angry snapped, something colder. I watched Derek slam his 4th beer, watched him command the crowd with his perfect delivery and timing, watched everyone hang on his every word. Derek lived for attention, craved it like oxygen. His wedding speech at his brother's wedding went for 25 minutes. Every story, every joke, every toast, Derek had to be the star, and that's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. Labor Day weekend, Derek announced his engagement to Brittany. Basic girl, obsessed with Pinterest, constantly filming everything for her 200 Instagram followers. She thought Derek was God's gift to comedy. The wedding would be next September, and Derek was already bragging about his vows. "I'm writing them myself," he told everyone at Thanksgiving. "None of that traditional crap. I'm gonna have everyone crying from laughter. Brittany loves when I do my impressions." "That's great," I said smoothly. No stutter. I'd been practicing with a speech therapist for months. Derek looked disappointed. "Yeah, well," he pivoted, "at least I won't need cue cards like someone would." There it was, Old Faithful, but I just smiled, because I'd been doing more than speech therapy. I'd been studying Derek like a final exam. His speech patterns, his breathing, the way he rushed through sentences when he was excited, how he never paused between thoughts. Most importantly, I studied his drinking habits. Beer made him louder, whiskey made him meaner, but champagne made him nervous. I also made friends with his groomsman Tyler, who happened to be a bartender. Tyler thought Derek was an a-hole too. Apparently Derek had made fun of Tyler's dyslexia all through high school. We bonded over Derek's stories at a sports bar one night. "He's got this weird thing about his wedding speech," Tyler told me after his 3rd shot. "Practices it every day, has it on his phone, makes Brittany listen to it constantly. She's sick of it, but won't say anything." By spring, I had everything I needed. The wedding was in 4 months. Derek had no idea that his perfect day was about to become a highlights reel he'd never lived down. And the best part? He was going to do it all to himself. The engagement party was my first real test. Tyler had gotten me on the catering crew for the event at Derek's parents' house. I spent the morning arranging champagne flutes while Derek held court in the living room, retelling the proposal story for the 12th time. I watched him work the room, noting how he touched his throat when he got excited, how his words started running together after his 2nd drink. Brittany floated around, showing off her ring while her mom filmed everything. Derek's mom, Linda, was in full hostess mode, making sure everyone knew her son had planned this whole party himself. Around noon, I made my move. Tyler had shown me Derek's phone password weeks ago. While everyone gathered for toasts, I slipped into the kitchen where Derek had left his phone charging. My hands shook as I opened his notes app and found the wedding speech draft. 23 minutes of material, just like his brother's wedding. I scrolled through, memorizing the rhythm, the callbacks, the pauses for laughter he'd marked. Then I heard footsteps. Derek appeared in the doorway, champagne glass in hand. My thumb hit the home button just as he spotted me near his phone. His eyes narrowed. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Lost, Jimmy?" He took a step closer. "Or just admiring my phone case?" I held up the dish towel I'd grabbed. "Just cleaning up. Catering duty." He studied me, taking a slow sip of champagne. I noticed his hand trembled slightly. "Funny, I don't remember you you ever working catering before? Needed the extra money, I said, keeping my voice steady. No stutter. The months of practice were paying off. Derek's smile widened. Extra money. Right. He picked up his phone, checking it. I held my breath, but he just pocketed it. You know what I think, cousin? I think you're up to something. Like what? Don't know yet. He stepped closer. I could smell the champagne on his breath. But I'm watching you. This is my day, my year. And if you think you're going to pull some stunt— Derek! Brittany's voice carried from the living room. They're waiting for your toast. He held my gaze another moment. We're not done, he said quietly, then headed back to his party. I leaned against the counter, heart hammering. He knew something was off, but he didn't know what, and that uncertainty would eat at him. The next few weeks, Derek turned into a detective. At every family gathering, he watched me. When I helped clear plates at Sunday dinner, he followed. When I chatted with Tyler at my cousin's birthday party, Derek inserted himself into the conversation. So Tyler, Derek said during one of these ambushes, you and Jimmy seem pretty chummy lately. Bonding over your reading problems? He laughed at his own joke, but his eyes stayed sharp, watching for reactions. Tyler just shrugged. We grab beers sometimes. That a crime? Depends what you talk about, Derek said. I started using Derek's paranoia against him. At family events, I'd make sure he caught me whispering to relatives, then stop when he approached. I'd check my phone and smile mysteriously when he was watching. Once, I left a wedding planning magazine on my car seat where he'd see it through the window. The effect was immediate. Derek started drinking more at gatherings. His jokes got meaner, more desperate. He'd interrupt conversations to demand to know what people were discussing. Brittany started apologizing for him. He's just stressed about the wedding, she told my aunt at Easter dinner, while Derek grilled my teenage cousin about why she'd been texting during his story. By May, Derek had become his own worst enemy. He accused his brother of trying to upstage his wedding. He made his groomsmen swear loyalty oaths at his bachelor party planning meeting. Tyler told me Derek had started making them practice their entrances, terrified someone would steal his spotlight. I kept practicing with my speech therapist, but now I practiced something else too. In the mirror each night, I rehearsed looking concerned, confused, innocent. I practiced my reaction for when everything went wrong. Memorial Day weekend, we had a family barbecue. Derek cornered me by the garage while everyone else played cornhole. I know what you're doing, he said. His breath was hot with beer and paranoia. What am I doing, Derek? You're planning something. For my wedding. He grabbed my shirt. Whatever it is, drop it. This is the most important day of my life. Brittany deserves perfect. I deserve perfect. I let him see a flash of something in my eyes. Not quite guilt, not quite defiance, just enough to feed his paranoia. I don't know what you're talking about. He shoved me against the garage door. I swear to God, Jimmy, if you try anything— Derek! My dad's voice cut through the yard. He stood by the grill, spatula in hand, watching us. Problem? Derek let go, straightening his shirt. No problem. Just catching up with my favorite cousin. He patted my shoulder hard enough to hurt. Right, Jimmy? After he left, I touched the tender spot on my shoulder and smiled. 3 months until the wedding. I wonder what Derek's really afraid of here. He's turning into his own worst enemy with all this paranoia about Jimmy's revenge plan. There's something fascinating about watching him spiral just from Jimmy's subtle mind games. Derek was already cracking, and I hadn't even done anything yet. That night, Tyler texted me. Dude's losing it. Made us practice the groomsmen dance 6 times today. Accused me of trying to sabotage his moves. I stared at the message, thinking about Derek's wild eyes by the garage, the way his hands shook, the desperation in his voice when he talked about deserving perfect. For a moment, I felt something like guilt. Then I remembered Christmas 2019, the buzzer at Thanksgiving, my little cousin's confused face at the lake house, the girlfriend who couldn't handle the family dynamic. I texted Tyler back. Good. Let him sweat. June arrived with a heat wave and wedding shower invitations. Derek had insisted on a couple's shower, probably to maximize his audience. I watched him at the party, noting how he flinched whenever someone clinked a glass unexpectedly, how he counted the gifts twice, suspicious someone might steal them. Brittany's mom pulled me aside during cake cutting. Is Derek all right? Brittany says he's been having nightmares about the wedding. I arranged my face into concern. Wedding stress, probably. He just wants everything perfect for Brittany. She nodded, but looked unconvinced. Across the room, Derek was interrogating the DJ about the playlist, convinced someone had requested songs to throw off his entrance timing. By July, Derek's paranoia had infected the whole wedding party. He'd made them sign contracts about their behavior at the wedding. No impromptu speeches, no surprise performances, no deviations from the schedule he'd laminated and distributed. Tyler showed me his copy at a bar one night. Look at this. Minute-by-minute breakdown. He's got my bathroom breaks scheduled. I studied the timeline. Derek's speech was blocked for 8:47 p.m. 25 minutes, just like he'd promised. The centerpiece of the reception, right after dinner, but before dancing. Prime attention real estate. He's been practicing in the mirror, Tyler continued. Brittany told her sister she's heard it so many times she could recite it herself. Something about their first date at mini golf, and a metaphor about putting practice in marriage. I filed that information away. The more Derek practiced, the more dependent he'd become on his rhythm, on his timing, on everything being exactly as he'd rehearsed. August hit like a hammer. 1 month to the wedding. Derek's calls to vendors tripled. He made Brittany's bridesmaids practice their walks until one of them quit. He hired security for the gift table, convinced someone would sabotage the cards. At the rehearsal dinner planning meeting, I volunteered to help coordinate vendors. Derek's eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Absolutely not, he said before I'd even finished offering. Come on, Aunt Linda said. Jimmy's trying to help. It's sweet. I said no. Derek's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. I've got it handled. Everything's under control. But it wasn't. I could see it in the way he kept touching his phone, checking his speech notes, the way he snapped at Brittany for suggesting they could cut the speech to 20 minutes. The way he'd started carrying printed copies of the speech everywhere, terrified of losing it. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything accelerated. Derek demanded loyalty oaths from family members. He tried to ban me from the wedding entirely, but Brittany's parents threatened to pull their funding if he excluded family without cause. He hasn't done anything, Brittany pleaded with him at a family dinner I heard about later. You're being paranoid. Paranoid? Derek had laughed, high and strange. I'm being careful. This is our day, Britt. Our perfect day. Tyler told me Derek had started sleeping with the speech under his pillow. He'd caught him practicing in the bathroom at 3 a.m., whispering to his reflection. 1 week out, Derek cracked. He called me at midnight, hammered and rambling. I know you're planning something, he slurred. But guess what? I'm ready. Got contingencies. Backup plans. You can't touch me, Jimmy. Can't touch this. I stayed silent, letting him rant. 25 minutes, he continued. 25 minutes of gold. Brittany cries every time at the mini golf part. Every time. You're gonna sit there and watch everyone love me. Watch them laugh. Watch them toast to me. Derek, I said calmly, I just want you to have a nice wedding. He laughed, ugly and sharp. Sure you do. Sure you do. Cousin. The mockery was half-hearted, like he'd forgotten why he was supposed to hate me. 3 days before the wedding, I met Tyler for final preparations. He looked nervous, kept checking over his shoulder. I don't know about this man. He's completely lost it. Made us do a full dress rehearsal yesterday, twice. Screamed at the photographer for being in his light. Cold feet? I asked. Tyler shook his head. It's just, what if this breaks him? Like, actually breaks him? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Derek, for all his cruelty, was still family. Still the kid who'd taught me to skip rocks at the lake before the accident. Before everything changed. Then I remembered the buzzer, the translator bit. The way he'd recruited others to mock me. The systematic cruelty delivered with a smile. He'll be fine, I told Tyler. Embarrassed, sure, but fine. Tyler didn't look convinced, but he nodded. We went over the plan one more time. Simple, really. Elegant in its simplicity. Derek would destroy himself, and all we had to do was create the right conditions. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through scenarios, backup plans, contingencies. Derek had been right about one thing. I was planning something, but not what he expected. Not some grand sabotage or dramatic scene. No, what I had planned was much simpler, much more devastating. I thought about Derek, probably lying awake too, clutching his speech notes, practicing for the 100th time, the 1,000th, banking everything on those 25 minutes of glory. Tomorrow, September 18th, Derek would take the microphone at 8:47 p.m. exactly. He'd be riding high on attention and alcohol, ready to deliver the performance of his lifetime, ready to be the star he'd always believed himself to be. And I'd be there, sitting at table 12 with the cousins and plus ones, watching, waiting, not for revenge exactly, for justice, for balance, for the moment when Derek would finally understand what it felt like when words wouldn't come. The wedding day dawned perfect and clear. I dressed carefully in the morning, choosing the charcoal suit Derek had mocked at his brother's wedding. My hands were steady as I adjusted my tie. No tremor, no hesitation. The months of preparation had led to this moment. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock at St. Mary's, the same church where Derek had served as altar boy and perfected his public speaking. I arrived early with the other groomsmen, watching Derek pace the vestry like a caged animal. He kept checking his phone, muttering his vows under his breath, then checking again. Tyler caught my eye and shook his head slightly. Derek had made him swear on his mother's life that nothing would go wrong. The other groomsmen looked exhausted from Derek's demands. One had a bruise on his shin from where Derek had kicked him during yesterday's final rehearsal for standing in the wrong spot. During the ceremony, I stood with the other cousins, watching Derek's hands shake as he held Brittany's. He stumbled over his vows twice, his eyes darting to me each time. The traditional vows he'd mocked were giving him trouble. His perfectionism was already working against him. The reception venue was Derek's pride, a restored mansion he'd spent months selecting. Every detail had been orchestrated, from the ivory linens to the string quartet. I helped elderly relatives find their seats while Derek supervised the head table arrangement, making the wedding party switch places 3 times. By 5 o'clock, cocktail hour was in full swing. Derek had limited himself to 1 beer, saving his tolerance for the champagne toasts. I watched him patrol the room, straightening centerpieces and adjusting the microphone stand. He'd already snapped at the DJ twice for deviating from his playlist. Tyler found me by the bar, his bow tie already loosened. He told me Derek had made the groomsmen practice their entrance 4 more times that morning. One of them had threatened to leave, but Derek's brother talked him down. The tension was spreading through the wedding party like a virus. During dinner, I sat at my assigned table, making small talk with distant cousins. Derek kept glancing over, his jaw tight. He barely touched his food, too focused on reviewing his speech cards. Brittany tried to get his attention, but he waved her off, mouthing the words to himself. At 7:30, the best man gave his toast. Short, sweet, respectful. Derek nodded approvingly, then checked his watch. 1 hour and 17 minutes until his moment. He excused himself from the head table, and I watched him disappear toward the bathroom, speech cards in hand. This was my opportunity. I slipped out through the side door and made my way to Derek's car in the parking lot. Tyler had given me the spare key weeks ago. Inside the glove compartment, I found what I was looking for. Derek's backup speech, laminated and perfect. I left it exactly where it was, but added something else. A small bottle of champagne, the expensive kind Derek loved, with a note, "For courage, your groomsman." Back inside, the father-daughter dance was ending. Derek had returned to the head table, his face flushed. He kept touching his jacket pocket where his speech cards were, then checking his phone, then touching his pocket again. The DJ announced the mother-son dance, and Derek moved mechanically through the steps with Aunt Linda. 8:15 arrived like a countdown. Derek's checking his speech cards like they're winning lottery tickets while his bride tries to get his attention. Nothing says true love quite like ignoring your new wife for index cards with mini golf metaphors written on them. Derek started drinking champagne faster, accepting every toast offered. His brothers tried to slow him down, but he brushed them off. He'd planned this moment for months. Nothing would stop him. Tyler appeared at my elbow during the cake cutting. He told me Derek had just downed 3 glasses in 10 minutes. The groomsmen were getting worried. Derek's hands were shaking again, but not from nerves, from anticipation, from the need to be perfect. 8:30. Derek stood abruptly, knocking over his water glass. He didn't notice. His eyes were bright, focused on the microphone stand. The DJ wasn't ready yet, still queuing up the spotlight, but Derek was already moving. Brittany reached for his hand, but he pulled away. I watched him stride across the dance floor, speech cards clutched in his sweaty palm. His brothers exchanged glances. His mother started to stand, then sat back down. Everyone could feel something building, like pressure before a storm. 8:40. Derek tapped the microphone, sending feedback screeching through the speakers. Half the room winced. He didn't apologize, just waited for silence. His breathing was audible through the sound system, quick and shallow. He looked down at his cards, then up at the crowd, then down again. 8:43. Derek cleared his throat. Once, twice, 3 times. He took a sip of water, then champagne, then water again. The room grew restless. Someone's baby started crying. Derek's eye twitched. 8:45. He began to speak, but his voice cracked. He stopped, touched his throat, tried again. The words came out rushed, tumbling over each other. He was speaking too fast, trying to make up for lost time. The carefully rehearsed pauses were gone. 8:46. Derek fumbled his cards. They scattered across the floor like white leaves. He dropped to his knees, scrambling to collect them. The microphone picked up his panicked breathing. Someone in the back laughed nervously. Derek's head snapped up, searching for the source. 8:47 exactly. Derek stood, cards reshuffled wrong, sweat beading on his forehead. He grabbed the microphone with both hands and started his speech from the middle, something about mini golf, then jumped to the ending, then back to the beginning. His voice rose higher with each fumbled transition. The room grew uncomfortable. Brittany's smile became fixed. The photographer lowered his camera. Derek's mother covered her mouth with her napkin, but Derek pressed on, his words accelerating into incomprehensibility. Then it happened, the moment I'd been waiting for. Derek's voice caught on a word. Brittany and I first met at a He stopped. His eyes went wide. He tried again. At a coffee. The stutter hit him like a physical blow. The irony was perfect. All those years of mocking my speech impediment, and here was Derek, center stage, struggling with the very thing he'd weaponized against me. But this wasn't my doing. This was Derek's perfectionism, his nerves, his desperate need for attention colliding with his worst fear. He tried to push through. Our first date, the champagne wasn't helping. The pressure wasn't helping. The hundreds of eyes watching weren't helping. Derek's carefully constructed persona was crumbling in real time. Someone in the audience shifted uncomfortably. A chair scraped. Derek's brother started to stand, maybe to help, but their father pulled him back down. This was Derek's moment. He demanded it, planned it, obsessed over it. I wanted to tell you all. Derek's voice broke completely. He set down the microphone and fled the room, leaving confused silence in his wake. Brittany sat frozen at the head table, her mascara starting to run. The DJ, professional that he was, quickly started the first dance music, but the damage was done. Derek's perfect moment had become his perfect humiliation, and I hadn't had to do anything except create the conditions for his own nature to destroy him. Tyler found me on the terrace 20 minutes later. Derek had locked himself in the bridal suite. Brittany was with him, trying to coax him out. The reception continued awkwardly without them, guests dancing to fill the silence. I felt no satisfaction, no victory, just a hollow sense of completion. Derek had finally experienced what I'd lived with for years. The frustration, the humiliation, the desperate desire to speak while your body betrayed you. The rest of the reception passed in a blur. Derek never returned. Brittany came down briefly to thank guests for coming, her smile brave but brittle. The groomsmen handled the final toasts. The cake went uncut. By 10 o'clock, people were leaving in awkward clusters. I helped Aunt Linda pack up the gift table. She looked older somehow, diminished. Her golden boy had tarnished himself in front of everyone who mattered to him. She caught my arm as I carried boxes to her car. She asked if I knew what had happened. I told her Derek had been under a lot of pressure. She nodded, but her eyes were knowing. Maybe she'd always known what Derek was. Maybe she'd just chosen not to see it. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages. The wedding was all anyone could talk about, but not in the way Derek had wanted. No one mentioned his perfect venue or his custom vows. They only talked about the speech, the breakdown, the way he'd fled his own reception. Tyler texted that Derek and Brittany had left for their honeymoon without saying goodbye to anyone. The groomsmen had found Derek's speech cards scattered on the bridal suite floor, torn into pieces. His phone was in the trash, screen cracked. A week passed, then 2. Family gatherings happened without Derek. His chair sat empty at Sunday dinner. His mother made excuses, work trips, prior commitments, but everyone knew he was hiding. The golden boy who'd lived for attention now couldn't bear to be seen. I continued my speech therapy. The exercises felt different now, less desperate. My stutter was still there, would always be there, but it no longer defined me. It was just part of who I was, like brown eyes or left-handedness, a characteristic, not a weakness. 3 weeks after the wedding, Brittany called. She wanted to meet for coffee. I found her at a small cafe downtown, no makeup, hair in a ponytail. She looked tired, but somehow more real than I'd ever seen her. She told me Derek had spent spent the entire honeymoon obsessing over the speech, playing it over in his mind, trying to figure out what went wrong. He'd blamed the champagne, the timing, the microphone, everyone but himself. Then she said something that surprised me. She knew about the mockery, had always known. She'd watched Derek imitate my stutter, had felt uncomfortable but never spoke up. She apologized for her silence, for choosing comfort over conscience. I accepted her apology, but offered none of my own. What happened to Derek was his own doing, his need for perfection, his cruelty, his inability to see others as fully human. It had all culminated in that moment at the microphone. Brittany told me they were in counseling. Derek was learning things about himself he'd never wanted to examine. The therapist had suggested he might have always feared stuttering himself, that his mockery came from a place of deep insecurity, that he'd attacked in others what he feared in himself. The autumn arrived with its usual family obligations. Thanksgiving loomed like a test. Would Derek show? Would he return to his old ways? Or had that night changed him permanently? I prepared myself for any possibility. My speech therapist helped me practice scenarios. What if Derek apologized? What if he attacked? What if he pretended nothing had happened? I was ready for anything. The week before Thanksgiving, my mother called. Derek would be there. He'd specifically asked if I was coming. She sounded nervous, worried about conflict. I assured her everything would be fine, and I meant it. I arrived at my aunt's house early, helping with food preparation. The familiar kitchen felt different somehow, less charged with dread. Other relatives trickled in, everyone carefully avoiding mention of the wedding. Derek arrived just before dinner. He looked smaller somehow, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time. Brittany was with him, holding his hand. They took seats at the far end of the table, away from his usual spot at the center. The meal progressed quietly. Derek didn't hold court, didn't interrupt, didn't perform. He ate in silence, occasionally murmuring to Brittany. When someone told a story, he listened without trying to top it. When there was laughter, he smiled without demanding to be the cause. After dinner, I was helping clear plates when Derek approached. We stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the debris of another family gathering. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. For a moment, I thought he might stutter. Instead, he simply said he was sorry. Not a performance, not a speech, just two words, heavy with everything he couldn't articulate. I nodded, accepting what he could offer. We didn't hug, didn't shake hands, just stood there in the kitchen, two cousins who'd traveled a long road to a simple moment of recognition. The evening continued without incident. Derek left early with Brittany, citing an early morning, but not before helping with dishes, something he'd never done before. Small changes, human changes, the kind that actually matter. I drove home thinking about cycles, how cruelty breeds cruelty, how pain seeks expression, how sometimes the only way to break a pattern is to let someone experience their own medicine, not through revenge, but through truth. Derek had built his identity on the ability to speak perfectly, to command attention through words. When that was taken away, even briefly, he'd face the vulnerability he'd mocked in others. And in that vulnerability, perhaps, was the beginning of empathy. The holidays passed. Derek remained quiet at family gatherings. Derek's champagne strategy really backfired. Turns out liquid courage doesn't mix well with public speaking. Who would have guessed? Poor guy scattered those speech cards like he was dealing poker at the world's most awkward casino. He and Brittany seemed closer, bonded perhaps by surviving his public humiliation together. He never mocked anyone's speech again, never brought props to dinner, never demanded to be the center of attention. By spring, a new dynamic had emerged. Derek and I could exist in the same space without tension. We weren't friends, would never be close, but the war was over. He'd learned what it felt like to have words fail you. I'd learned what it felt like to watch someone face their own cruelty. Neither of us spoke about the wedding. It had become family lore, mentioned in whispers when Derek wasn't around. But between us, it needed no discussion. The message had been delivered, the lesson learned, the score settled. I sometimes wondered if Derek ever figured out my role in his breakdown. The planted champagne, the psychological warfare, the way I'd used his own perfectionism against him. But it didn't matter. What mattered was the result. At Easter dinner, Derek's little brother started to mock a cousin's lisp. Derek shut him down immediately, his voice sharp with new understanding. The table went quiet, surprised by his intervention. But I wasn't surprised. People can change. Sometimes it just takes experiencing their own medicine. I continued with my speech therapy, not to fix something broken, but to strengthen something that was already whole. My stutter would always be part of me, but it no longer defined my worth or limited my voice. I'd found my power not in perfect speech, but in perfect timing. The wedding video, I heard, was never edited. It sat on a hard drive somewhere, containing Derek's moment of truth. But the real record was written in changed behavior, in small kindnesses, in the absence of cruelty, in the quiet recognition that we all have our struggles, our imperfections, our moments when words won't come. That summer, I gave a presentation at work. My stutter emerged during the introduction, as it sometimes did, but I pushed through, letting it be part of my rhythm rather than fighting against it. Afterward, a colleague complimented my authenticity, said it made me more relatable, more human. I thought about Derek then, how he'd spent so much energy trying to appear perfect, how that need for perfection had become his downfall, how in trying to be more than human, he'd revealed himself as deeply, flawfully human after all. The cycle was broken, not through grand gestures or dramatic confrontations, but through a simple truth. We all struggle with words sometimes. We all have moments when our bodies betray us, when our carefully constructed personas crack. The difference is in how we treat others when they face those moments. Derek had learned that lesson the hard way, in front of 200 wedding guests, with a microphone in his hand and champagne in his blood, with his perfect speech scattered at his feet and his voice breaking on the simplest words. It was poetic justice. It was necessary education. It was the end of one story and the beginning of another. A story where former bullies could grow, where victims could find strength, where families could heal, imperfectly but genuinely. The wedding day that dawned perfect and clear had ended in disaster and transformation. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen. Sometimes the only way forward is through the complete destruction of what came before. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to experience their own medicine, even if it takes years of planning, even if it means becoming someone darker than you wanted to be, even if it leaves you feeling hollow afterward. Because in the end, the point isn't revenge, it's revelation. It's forcing someone to see themselves clearly, perhaps for the first time. Derek saw himself that night. In his stuttering, stumbling attempt at perfection, he finally understood what he'd put others through. And in that understanding, however painful, was the seed of redemption, the possibility of becoming better, the chance to break the cycle. Time to wrap up this little commentary adventure, folks. Appreciate you letting me toss in my 2 cents here and there. Until our paths cross again. Subscribe for more content like this.